The price of crude oil on the global markets has fallen to its lowest in 5 years at $64.41 at the close of business on Wednesday. The price of Brent crude has also fallen 43% since mid-June. So what is the repercussion for Ghana? As a surprise rise in oil production in the United States appear to be pushing global prices. Now, crude oil prices on the global market could fall further from the 64.41 recorded as of Wednesday. Analysts believe over time we could end up at around $50 and $60. According to OPEC, demand for its crude oil is expected to fall to 28.9 million barrels per day next year, lowest in 10 years. What this means is that significantly more oil will be on the market than was demanded. So where does this leave Ghana? Let's get onto the phone line now and do some analysis on the matter. Kojo Poku, an energy expert, is joining us on the phone. Good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, Kojo. So what's the likely impact globally? Already Russia is feeling the pinch. So this drop in global prices, how is it affecting everybody globally?
Oh, well, it depends the budget indications that every finance ministry is doing. Let's say in Ghana, I don't know what they peg our input in terms of the oil account. I don't know what they peg it at. But what you're looking at, in Ghana, we're doing something like 100,000 barrels a day, with the year high of about $114 to $64, which is a difference of about $50 between the high and the low. We are looking at losing something about $5 million a day compared to the high. So if the Ministry of Finance did not anticipate and they really used the high number in terms of the budgeting, then you look at a deficit of about, let's say, $5 million a day running concurrently until the prices do pick up. So it is a big problem for a country like Ghana that we have become reliant on the oil money for the small economy that we run. The good side is that we should see the export in our forecourt come down. It's a bit unfortunate that it has not reflected as yet, but I think NPA should make us see that, because it's getting to the time when at 64, there's no justification where Ghanaians should be paying what they're paying at the export now.
Now, that brings me to my next question, really. You have just returned from the U.S. The U.S. Energy Department projects that the price of petrol in the U.S. will fall by about 23% to, let's say, $2.60 per gallon next year, saving the average U.S. household approximately $550 a year. This sounds very funny considering the situation in Ghana where we seem to be paying more.
Well, that's the point. Every country has their own equation. As you are aware, oil prices is the same everywhere, but it depends what every country's equation is. Now, I'm thinking in Ghana, because we borrowed heavily to subsidize the export, I think what the government or MPA is doing is trying to recover some of the money that they did lose or they did lose. So that is why, for now, we haven't seen it reflect in the export. But the U.S. have their own formula, and that's why they are saying that there's going to be a drastic reduction in the export in the U.S. Ghana, our formula is completely different. I'm sure the government is trying to recover some of the subsidies that they lost when the prices were very high, and that is why in Ghana we've not seen it. But I'm sure we should see it past the Christmas. I'm sure MPA would have to basically reduce prices drastically.
But do you also share the view that is coming forward from research conducted in the U.S. that because of the surprise rise in production, U.S. is producing about 12.3% of the total global demand? Do you share the view that this possibly is what's pushing down the prices globally?
The OPEC nations are very smart, and I can assure you that if the price tends to see the downward trend that it's seen in the past couple of months, there's going to be an OPEC meeting, and they are going to cut production to stabilize. Because bear in mind, they have also used certain figures in their budget. Now, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, and all the oil-producing countries, they have a price within which they do their budget on. Now, no OPEC country will sit back and let the price of crude oil go below the prices they've used for their budget. So if they see that the downward trend is going to affect them, then they are going to basically meet and cut production so that they create some stability in the market. So I don't think it's going to go downwardly further down to hurt the OPEC countries. So we don't tend to see the crude oil price going low as we would like. But I think the OPEC countries will basically meet and stabilize it.
Right. I'll hold you briefly and we'll continue the discussion from another angle. Now, also, Ghana's finance minister has announced that government has concluded a process for the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC, to take over the Ghana National Gas Company, move aimed at integrating the management of the two oil and gas establishment. According to the finance minister, the consolidation, and I quote, the consolidation of GNPC and GNGC will make it possible to enhance a more integrated management and continue financing of projects in the oil and gas enclave. Immediately, let's do some analysis on this particular angle. And Kwame Jantua, who is an energy expert also and a lawyer, is joining us. Mr. Jantua, good evening.
Good evening to you. Good evening to Ghana.
Good, great. Let's talk revenue. Let me shift focus to revenue. It's clear that this.
Say that. I can't hear you. There's a
okay. All right. Let me speak a bit clear so you can hear. Can you hear me now? Better now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that it's clear that this fall is going to affect Ghana's revenue from oil. How significant will this be?
You see, this is where some of us have been talking about tagging our budgets to oil revenue. Because if we tag our budgets to oil revenue, then it means when the price of oil falls, the revenue we're going to get from our oil is going to be minimal. And that would affect a lot of projects and a lot of investments that the government needs to do. It would affect debt. It would affect a lot of debt. So hopefully, when we look at our budget, last year, a certain proportion, about 32.6%, of the oil revenue was spent with regards to investments in this country. That is why some of us said, do not put the oil revenue in the consolidated fund. Put it in a separate account and use it as and when it is required.
Right. So
you tighten your natural revenues from other resources like cocoa and gold. You tighten all those loopholes where you get a lot of wastage.
So you anticipate that if this trend continues, if this drop in oil prices, which the OPEC countries feel that it could go as low as 50 or 60 by close of next year, you feel that if it continues, it's going to be problematic for our revenue generation and subsequently implementation of our country's budget support?
But at the present moment, it's 60.03 or 60.06 around that figure. I read today on the net.
I see.
I subscribed to the offshore magazine, and it was saying that, American crude was 60.83
I see.
or something like that, and Brent was around the same price. So it is dropping. And you see, the danger here is that they can decide to stop producing if the revenue they're going to get compared to the cost of production is going to be higher than the revenue. They can decide, okay, we cut production. Now, I heard my other colleague talk about OPEC. OPEC have decided they're not going to do anything about it, at least now. They're not going to cut because demand for OPEC oil has dropped also. Demand for, you see, in the previous year, what happened that showed up the oil price was the start of the kind of instability we had in the Middle East. And then China also. But at the first moment, Libya and all those places, they are producing. So there is huge glut. Apart from that, shale oil has come on the scene. And America now has taken a position of producing much more quantities of their oil.
That's right.
So really and truly, we should not tag our budgets to our oil revenue at present. And remember that in Ghana, we have only one oil field as the Jubilee field. Only one. It's not a multitude of fields that are producing. It's only one. So if the Jubilee partners begin to realize that the cost of producing oil is higher than the revenue, they might cut production. And what do we have to say? So it is a lesson for us. And I think we should take a cue from it and begin to not depend too much on oil revenue.
So, Mr. Jantua, do you anticipate that this is likely to affect budget support from donors? I mean, Russia and and US, if they are feeling the pinch of the price, the drop in global oil prices, they could be cutting back on their donor support to Ghana. You feel so?
Well, some of the donor support is contractual, which is already in the process. But for new ones, if I am feeling the pinch and my people are feeling the pinch, why should I use my taxpayers' money to give to somebody else?
Exactly.
It's going to be a challenge. But, this is where we need to sit up in, I wouldn't even say in this country, we need to sit up in Africa.
In Africa.
We need to sit up in Africa.
Now let's stay on the Ghana case a little bit. The Ghana Stabilization Fund under the Petroleum Revenue Management Act of 2011 is intended primarily to be a backup support for the annual budget in times of petroleum revenue shortfalls. Do you think we are going to hit this shortfall very soon?
If we hit the shortfall and we use the Stabilization Fund to support, will the Stabilization Fund run out? Won't it run out? It will run out. It's a question of planning. It's a question of planning. And I was just going to say, we have seen it now. What mechanisms are we going to put in place for the future? Because it looks as if they are saying that this price drop can go into the first quarter of next year. So how do we plan to cushion ourselves? What are we doing to make sure that we tighten the other resources we are getting in? This is why we need to sit down and plan and say to ourselves, we need to add value to some of these other natural resources we've got. So, for instance, bauxite. The Chinese are just taking the bauxite out of Ghana. What I believe Ghana should be able to do that. Any country or any company, any foreign company that comes into this country to mining or to be interested in our natural resources, they should say to them, set up a factory here so that we can produce some of that resource here in Ghana.
Right.
Because by doing that, we added value to it, and we can also export and increase the revenue we are getting. At the present moment, we are a prime exporter of natural resources, and it's been so for so long, and I do not understand why the successive governments we've got are not doing anything about it.
Very unfortunate. Mr. Janto, I'll have you hold briefly, and I'll bounce back to Kojo Poku, who is still on the line. So, Kojo Poku, you heard the narrative from Mr. Janto. It doesn't look too good. I mean, he says that Africa in general, our leadership must sit up. If you were advising government under the circumstance, we have not been able to get a response from the National Petroleum Authority. They referred us to the Finance Ministry, where we are also unable to get readily available response on this matter. But if you were to advise government under the circumstance, oil dropping on the international global market, the situation in Ghana is such that oil and gas government is still trying to do restructuring and streamlining operations of oil and gas in order to maximize benefit totally. What kind of advice would you begin to give government if you were tasked to do so?
Well, you see, to add a little bit to what Mr. Janto said, and then I would add to the bit on the advice. You know, in 2009, what the Ministry of Finance was doing is that the Ministry of Finance was doing two budgets. They were doing budgets without oil revenue, and they are doing budgets with oil revenue. The reason the then administration advised that should be done was that they don't lose the focus of what has really brought us to where we were at that time. Because you see, the oil revenue has a way of basically muddying the water, so you don't really see your real growth of your traditional exports. So post-2009, the budget that was prepared, the Ministry of Finance, there were two budgets, budget with oil projections and budget without oil projections. I think that culture should have continued. Okay, if that culture had continued, anybody who is projecting or doing forecast will have known that, okay, this is how bad our traditional exports or our traditional earnings are doing, and this is how well that they are doing.
So that really is your advice, that government should consider bringing out two budgets, one non-oil based and one oil based.
Budget not for public consumption, for the purpose of internal monitoring. because basically, if you have a budget, which you see, the oil revenue comes in and makes your accounts look good, okay? Because when it was all rosy and we're doing this amount and you multiply by the cost of crude oil, you put it in your budget, it makes your GDP and everything balloons, and it doesn't give you your true nature. Now, over the years, over the past 6-7 years, the real growth of our economy, has it been from our traditional export earnings, or has it been from the oil earnings? Those are some of the things that the government should be able internally to be able to assess. And my advice would be that to go back to that way of approaching planning. If you approach planning, because the oil revenue, like I said earlier, makes your accounts look good, but it doesn't really tell you how well your traditional earnings are doing. Look, cocoa has been with us for so many years. The gold has been with us for so many years, and that is what has brought Ghana until 2010, when we started having oil revenues added to our budget. Now, if right now, as we said, if we take the cocoa, if we take the oil earnings out of our budget, what is the state of our true economy, our traditional earnings? What has really brought us to today? You know, so I think for prudence, governments in Ghana or governments in Africa should really not constantly, because the volatility of the oil market. Look, let's remind ourselves. Not long ago, oil was $18, and it's not far off. You know what I mean? It hasn't been more than 10 years. Oil was about $18. So people should tend to know that some of these things, like the gentleman was saying, it can really drop as low as if the OPEC companies wanted to drop. It can drop as low. And then what happens to our economy? So if Ministry of Finance has heavily relied on oil earnings to cushion the budget, and that is not forthcoming, and bear in mind, the donor partners for the past 3-4 years has not really been fulfilling their part of then the hardship in the country is going to increase, or the so-called going to the market to get euro bonds, and most of these euro bonds also is also because of our oil earnings and our position in being an oil-producing country. That's why most countries will look at us, our ability to be able to pay back some of these euro bonds and the loans that we are taking. If they realize that the backbone of our ability to pay, which is the oil revenues, i.e. The 700 million that GMPC is contracted and said, it's going to be paid back through whatever, all those are being targeted on oil revenue.
Right.
If there is a slump, say it again?
Yeah, I'm listening. We're trying to wrap up so that we
if there's a slump in the oil market, then obviously your ability to pay back some of these loans becomes a problem.
Right.
So I think, like the gentleman said, the government should really not rely heavily on projection of our oil revenues in our budget and rely on it so heavily.
Right, Mr. Kojopoku, we are grateful for your time on today's Big Story. We still have Mr. Kwame Jantua on the line. Mr. Jantua, if you're there, I recall that effective 1st September, government instituted a quarterly hedge for Ghana's petrol, and we were told at the time that this is to protect us against price volatility and the rest. Now that this is happening, now that the prices are dropping, and consistently it has been going down since June, what happens to this hedging?
Well, I'm not sure exactly where it is, but if we've tagged the oil price at a hedge price, we are not going to benefit. But you see, this is where we have played politics too much in this country that is now coming to bite us. Why do I say that? We have Chama Oil Refinery. Don't you think if the successive government had made sure that they put the refinery back into shape, at the present moment, with oil prices at this, we could now at least refine our own oil for Ghanaians and not have to go into this situation.
And is this too late to do?
Will they do it? Nothing is too late if you plan for it. Will they do it? Because present moment, MPA owes the BDCs a lot of money, in millions, and they need to be able to pay them off, because if they don't pay them off, BDCs are not going to be able to bring refined petroleum products into the country. And that is the challenge we have at the present moment. I must say, MPA cannot continue to do it over a long period of time. A time will come when oil prices will drop so low and they will be forced, because the citizens are much more alert with these things than they were before.
But at this current low, perhaps, is it not time that we should be forcing the NPA to begin to go down?
We should, but they owe. They have debt. They have massive debt, and it's a vicious cycle.
But is it fair? Is it fair to pass the debt on ignorant, innocent Ghanaians who are all struggling to break even and make by?
How will they pay the debt then? Because the BDC, if the banks are not prepared to give LCs to BDCs to bring in refined petroleum products, how are we going to pay for those refined petroleum products? In the end, it will come to bite us as citizens. We will all have to park our cars and walk because NPA will not have the wherewithal to be able to pay what they owe the BDC. They need to be able to pay that money so the BDCs can continue to bring AGO, PMS, jet fuel, and all those refined products in so that we can also buy petrol to move. But there has to be a cap somewhere. They have to be able to cap it somewhere because Ghanaians would not be able to take it for too long a time. It's a vicious cycle. And you see, for me, what gets to me is that we do not learn from such situations. Let us now learn from it. Let us now say that, okay, we've been through this. Ghanaians have given us a chance to now clear the debt. Let's concentrate on toll. Yes, I understand they have a strategic investor for toll. But even having the strategic investor, who has the advantage? The strategic investor or Ghanaians? See, all these things we should look at. We should also concentrate on building the capacity of Ghanaians so that we can take control of it. The major problem with toll, so far as I'm concerned, is a management issue. It's a political issue. If we can straighten the management and we can take politics out of toll, I'm sure we start getting somewhere. The other thing is that we said we've got oil now. We are building an oil city, and we are building an oil estate in the Western region. How far has that gotten now? How far has that gotten now? When we decide to give one company, Lonro, the chance to build a port, when we have our own port and we are stopping our own port from expanding, how do we? It beats my imagination that we do not give ourselves the advantage and rather give outsiders the advantage. Because if for nothing at all, the money that we make, the money that Ghanaians make, stays in Ghana, gives our banks more capacity. The money that the foreign company makes, it goes out to make sure that their countries are made right. So we need to sit down and think. We need to sit down and think as Ghanaians. Above all, the planning of our country, and I'll keep saying this, I will not stop saying, the planning of our country depends on a national development plan, especially apart from project energy. We need to have a national development plan for energy. We need to be able to go to Africa and West Africa and say, energy is a critical situation for Africa.
Very
what
frustrating.
Do we do?
Very, very frustrating situation we have on our hand. Mr. Janto, I know we can continue the conversation on and on and on. So I'm grateful we need to wrap our discussion here. We're grateful you could join us on today's big story. Thank you very much, Mr. Janto. And also we're joined on the telephone line now by John Peter Amewu, who is a Director of Research at Africa Center for Energy Policy, ASAP. Good evening, sir.
Good evening and good evening to your listeners.
So how do we begin to explain what's happening in the fall of oil prices globally and how it is not reflecting in local prices against the backdrop that government is still following through with streamlining measures for the oil and gas sector?
Thank you and good evening to your listeners. It's rather unfortunate that the current fall in the oil prices are not really reflecting in the pocket of the individual. This is number one because of government, insensitiveness to the plight of Ghanaians. This is a government that will not want to listen to people when people complain of suffering. For instance, it's estimated that in the United States, the price of petrol will fall by 20%, 23%, which will, amount to almost about $2, $2
exactly,
per gallon. And that will create a savings of about $550 a year to the average, U.S. citizen. Why is it that in Ghana we are not witnessing that? The WTI, which traded as high as 102 at the beginning of last year somewhere, has fallen more than 40%. the Brent, has fallen by 43%.
That's right.
Currently, Brent is trading lower than $65 per barrel. And it is estimated that these prices will fall because of the shale production that we have in U.S., the glut, and also the rate at which the Libyan oil is coming into force. And again, the inability of the swing producer, which is the Saudi, to cut down production. So all these things are bringing down, some form of glut in terms of supply in the system. So prices are falling. And internationally, it's been affected by every consumer.
That's right. The MPA
are coming down.
The MPA, Ms. Amiwo, the MPA surely is not backing down on the price of your products locally. Are they still justified, really? I mean, they remain entrenched on keeping the prices at the current rate. Are they still justified? We do know that there are debts to service and all, but is it fair to still keep charging?
They are not fair to Ghanaians, because if the whole United States of America is going to make its citizens benefit as a result of the fall in prices, then what about Ghana? This government is just being cruel to Ghanaians, because it is clear that the fall of almost about 45%, in the Brent price must reflect in the pocket of the average Ghanaian. Prices are estimated to fall further to almost about $50 per barrel. Okay, and so we must also, enjoy the benefit of this falling price. I know government's, point is that this is going to affect our revenue. Of course, it will affect our revenue because we also produce oil. But don't forget, majority of Ghanaians benefit more from the crude oil we export, and the refined products that we bring in, than the little revenue we gain from our production. The benchmark revenue for this year, 2015, is estimated.
Mr. Amel, before you go, quickly, we started a discussion over whether it is time for us to equip the capacity of the Tema Oil refinery so that we can refine our own oil and use, under the circumstance that global prices are dipping. Should we be thinking about that now? And is this the wisest thing to do under the circumstance?
I think we have called for this over and over again. Tema Oil Refinery has done it again. They've done it before. And if some reasons they need capitalization to put back some of its equipment, that are not in place, we need to do that. We need to see how we can make Tema Refinery, more functional. I'm one of the school of thought who is saying that, well, if it means for injection of foreign capital from other partners, then we need to do that. Okay, the government needs to assist, Tema Oil Refinery to be able to look for external partners to put it in a competitive platform to refine its product. That perfectly is also one way of, making sure that we enjoy the benefits of price falling in the international market.
Right, Ms. Amil, I'm afraid we may have to just end our discussion. We're grateful that you could join us. I must say that the MPA declines comment on the matter and refers us to the Finance Ministry, where we are unable to readily get a response over these issues. Government of Ghana, you do know also that effective September 1st introduced a quarterly hedging in what it called a measure to avoid huge debts accumulating from the subsidizing of price differentials on petroleum products, and also to protect Ghanaians from a price hike during the review of prices by NPA. These were some of the issues that we wanted to put to them and ask questions over what happens to this quarterly hedging, whether it's still in place, whether there is going to be a review considering the continuous drop in the prices on the global market. But I'm afraid we couldn't get any response from them. My name is Stephen Enti, and that's where we draw the curtains for today's big story. We'll be right back with the interactive segment. Do stay.